It's 7:14 in the evening, and Dr. Warren Aldrich is still at his desk. The waiting room is dark. His last patient left 2 hours ago. But the office light stays on, because before he can go home, he has to open the folder he privately calls the other job, payroll, for 4 employees, the malpractice renewal notice, the lease. He signs his own paycheck last. Tonight, his is smaller than his office manager's. 20 miles away, Desmond Cole is locking his truck. He's 61, 35 years in the union. He hasn't opened a spreadsheet since the Reagan administration, and he has never once left a bill sitting open on the kitchen table. Same age, same decade of accumulated experience, 2 completely different relationships with money. And here's the part nobody tells you at graduation. The diploma on Warren's wall costs more than the stethoscope has ever paid back. Here's the thing nobody says out loud because it sounds ungrateful. Warren makes more money in a bad month than Desmond makes in 3 good ones. On paper, that should settle the question. It doesn't, because income and wealth are not the same pipe. Think of it like 2 pipes running side by side. Warren's pipe is wider, more water flows through it every year. Desmond's pipe is narrower, but it doesn't leak. Warren's does. 4 separate leaks, each one small enough to ignore in any single year, each one large enough to drain the pipe completely over 30 years. This isn't a story about a doctor who made bad decisions. Warren didn't do anything wrong. He did exactly what he was told to do. Go to school, take on debt, build a practice, project success. Nobody sat him down at 22 and explained that the wider pipe would come pre-installed with leaks Desmond's pipe would never have. That's the mechanism. Not malice, not stupidity, just structure built into the profession before either man ever chose it. Consider this. The average doctor graduating medical school today carries $216,659 in student debt. That's not tuition for 1 year. That's the total balance the day training ends and real income finally begins. 74% of physicians carry some form of this debt. 32% of them still owe more than $250,000 years into practice. Desmond, meanwhile, was earning wages during the exact years Warren was accumulating interest. Different pipe, different starting pressure, and that's before either man has paid a single dollar of overhead. And this isn't unique to Warren. It's the default architecture for almost every high-status profession built the same way. The attorney who bills $400 an hour and somehow never has $400 an hour saved. The dentist who owns the building and the practice and still can't tell you his actual number. Different diploma. Same 4 leaks. So here's what we're going to do for the next 20 minutes. We're going to open Warren's pipe and find every leak one at a time with the real numbers behind each one, not vague warnings. Then we're going to look at Desmond's pipe and understand exactly why it never had those leaks to begin with. And by the end, you'll know something almost nobody in Warren's position is ever told directly, the exact point where the 2 men's freedom crosses. Not their net worth, their freedom. Let's open it. Here's a number that sounds almost unbelievable until you trace where it comes from. The median physician's net worth at 30 is negative, not low, negative. Warren graduated medical school at 26, 6 figures in the hole. Then came 3 years of residency, 60-hour weeks, roughly $68,000 a year on average, barely enough to cover rent and interest payments, let alone save. By the time he saw his first real paycheck as an attending physician, he was 29. Desmond was 29 once too. He'd already been in the trade for 11 years. He started his apprenticeship at 18, paid not billed earning while he learned, with wages that rose every 6 months as his skill and his hours climbed. Here's the open question. If both men are the same age today, why does Warren still feel like he's catching up at 45? Because he is. The average time to pay off medical school debt pushes most physicians' debt-free age into their early to mid-40s. Some, on income-driven plans, don't cross that line until 48. Warren didn't start truly saving, not surviving, saving until somewhere in that window. Desmond had already been compounding for over 2 decades by then. This is the leak most people assume closes itself. It doesn't. It just moves further down the timeline, quietly, while the calendar keeps running for both men at exactly the same speed. Picture it side by side. At 29, Desmond had 11 years of wages behind him, a paid-off truck, and whatever he'd managed to put into his union's retirement fund since his first apprenticeship check. At 29, Warren had a diploma, a stack of interest statements, and a signing bonus that went straight to the balance he already owed. Same starting line on the calendar. Completely different starting line on the balance sheet. And interest doesn't pause to be fair. At a federal rate hovering around 7% every year, Warren's debt sits unpaid. It grows on its own, separate from anything he's earning, separate from how hard he's working. Desmond never carried a balance large enough for that math to matter. But wait, even once the debt is gone, does the gap actually close? That's leak 2. Warren's second leak doesn't show up on his diploma, and it never appears in the salary numbers you see quoted online. To run his own practice, Warren doesn't just pay himself, he pays a building. A 1,500 square foot suite runs him somewhere between $37,000 and $60,000 a year in most markets before he sees a single patient. He pays a staff of 3 to 5 people for every physician in the practice because medicine, unlike almost any other profession, requires an entire administrative apparatus just to open the doors each morning. And then there's the number that makes most people flinch: malpractice insurance. The national average sits around $7,500 a year. That's the good case. In higher risk specialties or litigious states, it climbs past $20,000, sometimes far higher. Warren pays his every single year, whether he's ever been sued or not. It's not a fine, it's the cost of admission. Desmond has never once paid rent on his own trade. When he clocks out, the tools go in the truck and the liability stays with the contractor who hired him. That's leak 2. And here's what makes it worse than leak 1. Leak 1 eventually stops. This one never does. It runs every year. Warren keeps his doors open for the rest of his career. Now, what does Desmond actually walk away with instead of an office lease? A union electrician's base wage alone runs $62,000 to $68,000 a year, roughly the national median. But that number isn't the real story. Fold in the pension contributions, the health coverage, and the annuity fund the union negotiates directly into his hourly rate, and his real total compensation regularly clears $100,000 in higher cost markets, with every dollar of it portable, following him from employer to employer, funded whether he remembers to think about it or not. Same rough income range as some of Warren's junior staff. 0 leaks attached to it. Quick pause here because this applies to a lot of people watching. If you've retired in the last few years and something feels quietly off, not the money's fine, but the days feel longer than they should, and you're not totally sure who you are without the job title anymore. That's more common than anyone admits out loud. I put together a short guide for exactly that feeling. It's pinned in the comments. Worth 2 minutes of your time if any of this sounds familiar. This is the leak that doesn't show up on any spreadsheet, because it isn't a bill, it's an expectation. Warren didn't choose a modest car because a modest car doesn't match the office he built, the neighborhood his patients expect to find him in, the school his kids attend, alongside the children of the specialists he refers to. None of that was written down anywhere. Nobody handed him an invoice for status, but he pays it anyway, every month, the same way you pay a subscription you forgot you signed up for. Desmond drives what he's always driven. Nobody expects an electrician to project anything. That absence of expectation isn't a small thing. It might be the largest leak of all 4, because it's invisible even to the person paying it. Here's the layer most people miss on the first pass. This leak compounds the same way debt does, just in reverse. Every dollar spent maintaining an appearance is a dollar that never enters the pipe that was supposed to eventually set Warren free. It shows up in small decisions that never feel like decisions at all. The country club membership he half uses, kept mainly because 2 of his referring surgeons are members. The larger house in the district with the right schools, purchased the year his oldest started kindergarten. None of these were reckless. Each one, on its own, looked like an ordinary, responsible choice for a man in his position. Stacked together over 30 years, they were never separate choices at all. They were one long subscription he never remembered agreeing to. So add it up. 8 lost years of compounding. A recurring 6-figure overhead structure that never turns off. A status tax with no receipt, running quietly in the background for 3 decades. Warren's pipe was wider from the day he graduated, and it has been leaking since the day he graduated too. Desmond's pipe was never wide, but it was never supposed to be. It didn't need 4 separate patches because it was never built with 4 holes in the first place. And that's the loop this whole video has been building toward. The man everyone assumed had already won the game was never even playing the same one. Walk into Warren's practice on any given Tuesday and you'll see the version of success our culture agreed to celebrate: the framed degree, the waiting room full of patients, the parking spot with his name on it. Walk into it as an accountant instead of a patient, and you'd see something closer to a business carrying 4 structural liabilities that never appear on the wall, the business card, or the holiday newsletter. Both versions are true. Only one of them determines when he actually gets to stop. So where does this leave you watching this at 60, wondering which pipe you've been standing next to your whole career? If you're in a high-status, high-income profession, a doctor, a lawyer, a business owner carrying six-figure overhead, here's your honest math. If your debt-free age landed somewhere between 40 and 48, and your recurring overhead runs even a modest 10 to 15% of gross revenue every year, you have been running two invisible mortgages simultaneously for most of your working life. One, you finished paying. One, you never will, until the day you close the practice for good. If you're in a technical trade with union representation, an electrician, a plumber, a pipe fitter, your math looks almost backwards from what our culture tells you to expect. You started earning at 18 or 19 instead of 29. You've likely had access to a portable pension the entire time, one that follows you between employers, funded whether you remembered to contribute or not. Put real numbers on it. A physician carrying $216,659 in debt at graduation, paying it down aggressively through their late 30s, who then runs even a lean 12% overhead on $350,000 in gross practice revenue, is quietly redirecting $42,000 a year every year before a single dollar reaches an investment account. A union electrician earning $68,000 a year with a fully funded pension and no debt at all is often net saving a comparable share of income without ever having carried the first man's starting deficit. Now, here's the number. Almost nobody in Warren's position hears directly the turning point. Run it forward. Warren's net worth on the physician median moves from roughly negative at 30 to somewhere around $500,000 by his late 30s. And doesn't cross $1 million until around 45. Desmond crossed six figures in his own retirement accounts years earlier, with none of it ever leaking back out to cover overhead, malpractice, or a lease he can't walk away from. But net worth was never the real scoreboard in this video. Freedom was. Because $1 in Warren's investment account and $1 in Desmond's pension fund are not interchangeable. Warren's dollar still has a job to do. It has to eventually fund an office lease, a staff payroll, an insurance renewal for as long as he keeps working. Desmond's dollar has already done its job. It's just his. That's why the honest answer to who retires richer was never really the right question. The right question is, who reaches the point where they can walk away without their income evaporating the moment they do? For a lot of physicians, that point doesn't arrive at 60. A survey of over 1,600 physicians found 45% want to retire before 65, but current projections show 2 out of every 5 physicians will still be working past that age over the next 15 years. Not because they love the job more than Desmond loves his, because the leaks are still running, and closing the doors doesn't stop the overhead, it just stops the income that was covering it. And here's the trap almost every high-income earner falls into, whichever side of this you're on. If you're the one with the wider, leakier pipe, you probably think, I make so much more, surely I'll catch up eventually. Sometimes that's true, but eventually has an expiration date. And for a lot of physicians, that date arrives around the same time patients start asking when you're going to retire. If you're the one with the narrower, sealed pipe, you may have spent decades quietly assuming the person with the frame diploma had already won. That assumption cost you nothing directly. But it's worth naming, because pride runs in both directions. One man protecting the status the diploma bought him, the other assuming the diploma had already settled the argument before either man's actual freedom was ever measured. So if you recognize yourself in either pipe, here's what actually moves the needle. Step 1. Audit your own leaks, not your income. Pull your actual overhead, rent, staffing, insurance, licensing as a percentage of gross revenue, not net. Most physicians have never seen that number written down in one place. If it's above 15% and climbing every year, that's not a fixed cost. That's an active leak, and it deserves the same attention you'd give a bad investment. Step 2, separate your identity from your overhead. If a 2,000 square foot office was never about patient care, but about how the practice looks to referring physicians, that's status tax, not medicine. Downsizing the space doesn't downsize the doctor. It closes leak 2. Step 3, build your own portable floor. Desmond's advantage was never the paycheck. It was the pension that never depended on him remembering to fund it. If you don't have a union behind you, you build that floor yourself. An automatic, non-negotiable contribution that hits your retirement account before overhead ever sees the money, the same week it arrives, every single time. Step 4, Put a number on your actual freedom date, not your net worth date. Ask a fee-only advisor to calculate the year your income from investments alone covers your living expenses without the practice attached to it. For most physicians, that date is years earlier than the date they assume they'll finally retire once the leaks are actually patched instead of just tolerated. Step 5. If you're already past 60 and the leaks are still running, don't panic audit. A 10% reduction in recurring overhead found today is worth more to your actual freedom date than another 5 years of higher revenue that keeps leaking out the same 4 holes it always has. Even physicians within a few years of walking away have found 6-figure savings simply by renegotiating a lease, right-sizing staff, or shopping malpractice coverage they'd auto-renewed without comparison for a decade. None of these 5 steps require you to earn less, work fewer hours, or apologize for the income you've built. They require you to stop treating overhead as fixed weather and start treating it as a leak with an actual valve. You don't need a bigger pipe. You need to close what's already leaking. Start with step 1 this week before the next lease renewal locks you into leak 2 for another 3 years. So why doesn't anyone tell physicians this directly? Not in medical school, not during residency, not even at the white coat ceremony where everyone in the room already knows how this story usually ends. Because the entire system that trains Warren also profits from every leak he carries. The lending institutions profit from the 8 lost years. The insurance carriers profit from the malpractice premium. The real estate market profits from the 1,500 square foot suite he leases instead of the smaller one he'd actually need. Nobody in that chain benefits from Warren finding leak 2 and closing it early. This isn't a conspiracy. Nobody is meeting in a room deciding to keep Warren working past 65. It's simpler than that, and in some ways worse. It's just incentives quietly aligned against him for 30 straight years. Here's the reframe. Warren didn't fail at building wealth. He succeeded at building status because that's the exact thing the system was built to sell him from his first acceptance letter forward. Wealth and status were never the same purchase, even though they were marketed to him as a package deal. And once you see that distinction, you can't go back to not seeing it. Not for Warren, not for anyone in a high status profession you know. The diploma on the wall was always going to cost something. The only real choice was ever whether it also cost his freedom. There's a version of this story where Warren resents Desmond, and a version where Desmond resents Warren, the one who had it easy, the one who gets to be the doctor. Neither resentment survives contact with the actual numbers. Desmond didn't get lucky. He entered a structure with no leaks built into it, and he never left the money in a position where it could disappear quietly. Warren didn't get cheated. He entered a structure with 4 leaks built into it, on a system's terms he never got to negotiate, and largely never noticed until someone finally opened the pipe and showed him where the water was going. Neither man needs your sympathy. What both of them deserve is the same thing you now have that they didn't at 22, the actual shape of the pipe they were about to spend their life filling. So it isn't that medicine is broken, and it isn't that Warren made a mistake choosing it. It's that you now understand the architecture he never got to see 4 leaks, running quietly for 30 years, dressed up as the ordinary cost of success. From here forward, when you see a framed diploma on someone's wall, you'll ask a different question than you used to. Not how much do they make, how much of it actually stays. That's the whole distinction this channel exists to make visible. Because the moment you can see the leaks, you can start closing them, whichever pipe you happen to be standing next to. Warren's story isn't a warning about becoming a doctor. It's a warning about assuming the size of the pipe was ever the same thing as the size of the freedom waiting at the end of it. If this changed how you look at your own numbers, leave a comment and tell me which leak hit closest to home. And the real question left standing is this: if you added up every leak in your own pipe today, what would the real number actually be? See you in the next one.